Welcome to This Explainer. Okay, today we're going to attempt something that honestly might just break our brains a little bit. We're bridging the gap between quantum mechanics and the logical argument for an ultimate creator. We're unpacking a fascinating source that argues there's a direct scientific line you can draw from the absolute microscopic behavior of particles all the way to a grand cosmic architect. It's a total mind-bending journey that takes us straight from the laboratory and drops us right into theology. So let's take a quick look in our agenda to see how this all builds. We've got 1. Quantum Physics 101, 2. The Observer Effect, 3. The Philosophical Riddle, 4. The Infinite Regression, and 5. The Ultimate Observer. It's a really structured journey from the scientific mysteries of wave collapse to a pretty staggering philosophical deduction. All right, Section 1, Quantum Physics 101, the foundation. Let's get our bearings here.
We gotta start with quanta. The speaker in our source describes quanta as the individualized, digitized bundles or particles that make up the absolute bedrock of our physical reality. And why does this actually matter to us? Well, because everything around us, your phone, the chair you're sitting on, literally our own bodies, is fundamentally made of these bundles. But the thing is, they don't behave like the normal solid objects we interact with every single day. Instead, these quanta exist in what physicists call a wave. Before they're measured, these digitized bundles exist in a wave of possible states. Just try to imagine a myriad of possibilities of where this particle can be and what it can be, all happening at exactly the same time. The source even points out that scientists have discovered a non-local state where all light photons in the universe essentially know each other. I mean, it's incredibly strange, right? It's completely counterintuitive to our daily experience. But that wave of endless possibilities doesn't actually stay a wave forever. It eventually becomes a single fixed reality, a collapsed single state. And the trigger for that change? Well, that is where things get truly wild. Moving on to Section 2, the Observer Effect, watching the wave. So what happens when someone actually looks at these possibilities? The source highlights a truly mind-bending concept. When an observer is present, the wave of possibilities collapses down into an actual single state. Simply put, observation reduces several potential states into one single reality. The speaker emphasizes this point heavily, quoting the incredible idea that consciousness causes the collapse of the wave function. Without someone watching, it's just this fluid wave of potential, but with a conscious observer watching, it locks into a fixed physical state. Which brings us to Section 3, the Philosophical Riddle, Perception and Reality. This scientific observation introduces a massive philosophical complication about the very nature of reality. We aren't just doing math anymore. We're asking what it means to actually exist. To explain this, the speaker brings up George Berkeley's famous riddle. We've all heard it. If a tree falls in the woods and no one is around to hear it, does it make a sound? Well, that was originally a rebuttal to some of Berkeley's other assertions. The speaker notes that based on what we seem to know about quantum physics right now, this suddenly becomes a highly scientific question. So here is the fundamental question of quantum physics. If the wave function requires a conscious observer to collapse into reality, can the universe, or anything in it for that matter, exist unobserved? If no one is around to see, hear, touch, or smell the tree, how could it be said to exist in a fixed state at all? Let's look at Section 4, the infinite regression, the logical loop. The crucial point is how this riddle creates a really complex logical deduction. The speaker takes this requirement for an observer and basically stretches it out to its ultimate logical conclusion to explain the sheer existence of our universe. The argument goes like this. If you need an observer to initiate the wave function collapse of any quantum material, you logically need another observer to initiate the collapse of the wave of that first observer's existence. Think about it. Step 1, observer 1 forces a photon into a fixed state. But wait, observer 1 is also made of quantum material. So, step 2, they need observer 2 to observe them, so their states collapse into reality. And step 3? Yep, you guessed it, that second observer would logically need a third observer. This is exactly what the speaker calls a continual regression of observers. It creates an endless loop. It's an infinite set where everyone and everything is essentially just waiting for someone else to observe them into a single solidified state. If everyone inside the universe requires another observer to lock them into reality, you end up with an endless, totally unsolvable chain. If nothing could ever truly begin to exist on its own, well, how are we even here? And that leads us to our final section, Section 5, the Ultimate Observer, Breaking the Loop. To break this infinite trap of observers needing observers, we have to look outside the system entirely. Using the analogy of dominoes set up on a table, the speaker makes a super practical point. You could set up the most elaborate, room-filling chain of dominoes ever created, but if that final domino is going to fall, if the whole magnificent set is going to actually go off, you absolutely need someone to push that very first one. And crucially, the force that pushes that first domino cannot be part of the domino set itself. It requires an outside force to kick off the chain reaction. So, applying this domino logic back to quantum mechanics, the argument states that, for the entire set of observers in the universe to exist, for all those individual waves to collapse into the reality we see around us every day, there is a strict logical requirement for an observer outside the set. You fundamentally need a consciousness completely separate from the continuous loop of our physical universe. It's a logical necessity to have a consciousness outside the set to collapse the wave of the entire universe into existence.
And this brings us to the core concept of the source material, the ultimate observer. The speaker argues this isn't just some fun late-night theory, but a lock-proof logical necessity. Because the trigger for wave collapse requires consciousness, the source dictates there is a strict logical need for a conscious entity that exists entirely outside the physical universe to initiate existence. This outside force can't just be an inanimate object or a random physical law. The math and the logic strictly demand a conscious creator. Impartially following this exact deductive arc to its absolute end, the speaker argues that this scientific requirement for an ultimate consciousness points directly to a logical need for God. Specifically, the source concludes that this ultimate observer is Yahweh, the God of the Bible, the exact entity described in Genesis 1:1 as creating the heavens and the earth. From the digitized bundles of quanta all the way up to a supreme creator, the source uses the mechanics of wave collapse to build a modern, scientifically framed logical proof for intelligent design. Whether you're looking through a microscope at a laboratory photon or you're reading ancient philosophy, this explainer leaves us with a truly fascinating final thought to ponder. If the very fabric of our physical reality fundamentally requires an observer just to exist, who is observing us? It's a question that really challenges us to look at the world around us and the vast universe above us in an entirely new light. Thank you so much for joining me to unpack this fascinating source material. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I will see you in the next explainer.